Folks, I'm gonna start because I think we really want to maximize our time for the back end of this presentation. We're going to ask that you hold questions. We can possibly do questions we will do it in the back end, but you can do Q&A, I guess chat, Vasily, is that fair to say? Those two mechanisms to provide questions for the back end?
Yes.
Okay. And but I'd like to welcome everybody. My name's Todd Urbutina from 3 Core True Wealth Management. Today's presentation is actually being provided by our 3 Core True Wealth Tax Solutions. And Mandy Vasily, who's our CPA, she's the leader of that practice. And for our wealth management clients, we do, as part of our True Wealth Management, we do tax returns, tax planning. And in this particular situation, this is real estate tax planning, which is really an area which we need to defer to people who are expert, who I'll briefly or quickly introduce here in a minute. So real estate taxes obviously are a significant number for a number of our clients. And this reassessment obviously is that it has been a huge question for clients, providing some angst and some heartburn. But we are recording this as well, and we might, very possibly make this as available to other folks and so forth after this meeting that you could share. So again, I really just want to thank you for tuning in and listening in, and I thank Vasily for moderating this, and most importantly for Kevin Brown and Sharon DiPaolo who put this presentation together. And again, so we'll start right now. And again, thank you very much for putting this together.
Kevin, you want to start with an introduction and tell a little bit about your background, and then I'll do the same?
Yeah, sure. My full name is Robert Kevin Brown Jr., but I go by Kevin Brown. I've been an attorney since 1985. I also have a real estate broker's license and have a real estate company, Prady Real Estate Services, that actually started originally in 1995 in Beaver. And I'm also state certified general real estate appraiser, and I've handled, even before I got out of law school, dealing with assessments primarily in Allegheny County, but my practice has been basically up and down Western Pennsylvania relative to real estate assessments.
Thank you, Kevin. And my name is Sharon DiPaolo. I'm also an attorney. I've been practicing over 25 years. I'm from Pittsburgh. My law practice is exclusively handling assessment appeals. So it's all that my firm does. I'm a partner at Siegel Jennings. We are coming up on our 50th year in business in 2024, the year of your revow. And I'm on the firm's leadership team, and I manage the firm's Pennsylvania law practice. And at our law firm, the only thing we do is represent commercial property owners in their assessment needs and their real estate tax assessment needs. And to jump off of Todd's statement there as we came in, for commercial properties, the real estate expense is the largest controllable operating expense that you have. So even in a non-reassessment year in Pennsylvania, there's lots of opportunities to evaluate your properties, but we do need to dive into Beaver County.
And let me just add one thing. At the outset, whatever comes out of my mouth is generally going to be primarily about the residential side, and whatever comes out of Sharon's mouth generally is going to come out of the commercial side. Any commercial questions anybody has, direct to Sharon, because she digs into that all over the state, and mine are primarily dealing with the residential things.
Yes, thanks for reinforcing that, Kevin. I do not handle residential cases. And Vasily's going to advance the slides for us. So you've got our contact information there, and the slides will be available to you afterwards as well. And so Vasily, if you would take us to the next slide. What Kevin and I are going to do, this is our second of a 2-part series. Our first session, I believe, was April 11th. And so we're not going to revisit all of the slides from before, but we're going to hit a couple of high points here to set the stage for those of you that weren't able to make it for the April session. So we just want to hit here, it's Beaver County's first reassessment since 1982. Pennsylvania is the only state without a countywide reassessment. And if you would advance, please. And here, really, the focus here to get in your mind as you prepare for filing an appeal or not, is the central question. What is the property worth? What would a willing buyer pay a willing seller for the real estate that's at issue? So what is the current market value of the property? Kevin, anything to add on that slide?
No, other than when we get down to it, there's actually a form that they are handing out at Beaver, the assessment office, that actually, in a way, kind of is confusingly contradicts what we just said, but we'll address that in a little bit.
When we get to the form, thank you. Next slide. The point of the reassessment is to equalize everybody's assessment, so everyone's paying their proportionate share. Most times in a reassessment, we see about a third of the properties go down in value, a third go up, and a third, I'm sorry, taxes go down, about a third go up, and about a third stay the same. And that's so that we're all paying our fair share. And again, 96,000 properties in Beaver County. That's going to come up later too when we talk about accessing your data. Next slide. And here, I don't want to belabor the assessment to market value ratio. That is when you're looking at your 2023 to compare apples to apples. So if you need a tutorial on that, if you would go back and watch our first webinar. And next slide. So you're looking at your final notice now with the final value on it, your 2024 value. That is in current market value dollars. We talked in our first session about whether or not you should partake in the opportunity that was on the notice about informal hearings. Kevin and I both had thoughts about that. And in the comments, I'd be curious to hear what your reactions were on informals. I would like to give a little bit of color, and Kevin, if you have any examples. I generally do not do too many informal hearings. Usually I use it as a way to find out what the county's data is on my clients' properties. This year we did do one because we had a case that we had just had appraised and by both sides, and we had just reached a settlement this year and earlier in 2023 in the first quarter. And when we got the county's tentative notice, why they took it right back up $3 million higher than where we settled the case. In fact, they raised it right to where we had challenged it when we filed the prior year. We felt like that was a fair thing to go in and ask them to just reset it since this had already been adjudicated through the courts system. And we got no change on that. We got the final decision for our client. I'm sorry, the final assessment for our client. And we will be having to file and start that process over again. So Kevin, did you have any insights on informal from Beaver?
Well, I actually had a couple people reach out after the April, and one, I basically told the three that I spoke with, one actually did do this. You go in and you find out how they did what they did. And interestingly enough, the one, without going into great detail, he went in, found out what they did, and it ended up leading to them recognizing that his house that was on 5 separate lots was really one economic unit, even though they had it taxed as 5 separate lots, including the one lot the house was on. And they had each one of those lots classified as a separate buildable lot. And when he went in there and through the conversation without him really admitting much of anything, they recognized that they mischaracterized those lots and said, we'll take care of that. And I actually just talked to him yesterday. And for those 4 lots, they did actually drop the values to 20% of what they were.
Right. So that's awesome. That's an awesome report. So there are opportunities where folks can get a change. My lived experience is typically no changes occur that are helpful to taxpayers, but occasionally
That said,
we get one.
What I will say, and to those who heeded the warning to not go, both the people that went were people who were very seasoned in keeping their mouth shut. So those people who did not go, now, if you do file an appeal, this is your opportunity to say, hey, this number here, you've got, I don't have 5 bedrooms, I have 3. So you've beefed up your argument if you do file an appeal now that this quote unquote final number has come out. Whereas before, if you'd have gone in and said, hey, I got 3 bedrooms, not 5, they might have tweaked your number a smidge. And then you'd have thrown away that argument to use at this point if you end up filing an appeal.
That's right. I'm going to skip the tax rates. We're going to come at that a little bit later. And I want to move into, even though the next slide, if you would please advance it, is about the tentative notice. Really want to show, and let's skip this slide as well. This was when we were comparing last year to this year. So what we want to drive with the next couple of slides is what changed from the tentative to the final. And this is just a sample property here, right there in the middle. You see about that opportunity to have an informal meeting. You also see the tentative value down there. And if you would advance the slide. And again. Okay, and that was just a larger thing, and advance again. And again. So here is what we wanted to drive some discussion around, what's changed since April. In April, we sat here, and the words here that you see in red, we're highlighting that was when what the situation was in April. You could look up your 2023 county blotter, or most people still have access to their 2023 tax bill to see what your old assessment was. But what's changed here is before June of 2023, when we sat here with you in April, one of our tips and tricks was, hey, it's worth looking up on the county website. You can go to your assessment, you can click around on property record card and see, and this would be the old historical data that they have on your property. It would have been the handwritten notes over the years and things like that. And we thought that was, it's a nice hint. That is, spoiler alert, no longer accessible sitting at home from your computer. So let's advance the slide. And that's why I have that highlighted. What was available online as of 2023 as of April. And if you advance the slide, you see down there at the bottom, in addition to seeing that the old assessment for 2023 was 63.5, you also see 3 hyperlinks there: owner history, view property record card, and view GIS. So owner history, had you clicked on that, would give you all the sale prices and owners. If you clicked on view property record card, that was your window portal into that old handwritten property record card information. So you could find out, what square footage they had, things like that. And then if you clicked on view in GIS, that is your aerial mapping system, where you see in that example Kevin gave with 5 lots and how they're being used, if you get an aerial image. Went on this weekend, and the bottom 2 hyperlinks are no longer working, so in owner history. And I'll show that. I think I have the slide next if you advance facility. So online data as of today, I went in and you can see I've highlighted in the upper left, this is yesterday afternoon, same property. Look what's missing down there. There is no view property record card. There is no view in the GIS. There is still the owner history. That is still a hyperlink. And of course, this is this person's 2024 assessment. So that's why you see that 63 go to the 438. But Kevin, did you want to talk about, accessing your, the county's data on your property?
Well, I went down and just went in to the assessment office last Thursday, not as a lawyer. I mean, I am, but I didn't walk in and say, hey, I didn't know. Just walked in like a consumer and asked, hey, do you have any record, cards for anything? No, we took them down. Come on over here. And there's, I think, if I count correctly, there's 4 terminals, and it's all online, and it's beautiful, the amount of detail they have. I mean, it's awesome. Problem is, I said, well, how do I access this at home? Because I see that web address right there. You can't. I can't? No. You have to come down here, and if you want a page of anything, it's $1 a page. And I thought, okay. Now, I will tell you from a very practical standpoint, especially with regard to trying to analyze any kind of anything, one of the most important things, especially with regard to residential, and trying to even glean about comparability, uniformity, or whatever, is to use a unit of comparison called dollar per square foot of building area. Well, they have the square footage that they're using on each and every one of those beautiful many-page. I mean, it's beautiful. It's in color. It's great. But if everybody, the only way you can get there is go to one of those 4, and let's say, what are there, 90-some thousand parcels of real property that have been
Yep.
reassessed? What have you got? What 8,000 people that want to go down, you're going to have to get tickets like going to the bakery. And they're going to have a line going down 3rd Street if that's the only way that you can access that stuff. So it makes it extraordinarily difficult to try and make any kind of comparison. My point is that let's say you have a house in Beaver, and actually one of the things I did when I went down is I had a potential client in mind. I know Beaver pretty well, drove past the house, looked at the other 3 places that I thought might be comparable. And it's one of the reasons I went to find out about the property cards, because you got to find out dollar per square foot, because if the particular client's place is now valued at 300 and one's valued at 250 and another one's valued at 275 and another one's at 200 and they're all in Beaver, well, if those ones that are valued less than my clients also happen to be smaller and the dollar per square foot actually works out kind of the same, well, then you kind of have no case. But if you don't have all of that data kind of readily available, it makes it really, 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 really hard to prove a point. Because just because your neighbor's house down the street, you know really well, is a lot nicer than yours, unless you're involved in just buildings like I've just, for the last 30 some years, I know what sizes are, square footages are, and all that other kind of stuff. But to the lay person, your neighbor's house is assessed at 250, you're at 3.25, and you think, well, that house is like nicer than mine. Mine should be down that low too. Well, could be that house is actually significantly smaller than yours, nice though it may be. And actually, the 2 houses are kind of uniform from an assessment standpoint. So whatever they're doing down there right now and making it inaccessible from your, home, this makes it super difficult.
Makes it very difficult. And this countywide reassessment by Beaver County was contracted out to Tyler Technology. And my experience with Tyler Technology, a company out of Texas, my experience when they come into Pennsylvania and do these revals, they do have that very robust, beautiful property record card for commercial properties. It will include an income approach. You can see what rent they are ascribing to your property. Obviously, what square footage, sometimes a cost approach might be 6 or 10 pages. But my experience with Tyler backed reassessments is that information is typically held back by Tyler and the county officials under the statement, we wish to have everything finalized first through the assessment appeals process. If we move to the next slide, please, we will see that our statute requires the county to maintain a permanent record system of your GIS aerial map and all the dimensions of your property and all of that. And, query in this day of age post-COVID, what is appropriate access for the public, if it is really appropriate at this point. It might have made sense in the 70s that you had to drive down there and open a book, but doesn't make sense here in 2023 that you should have to drive downtown and stand in front of 4 kiosks in line to get to see the data that the county used to assign to your property. Feels like a due process issue there, at least as a practical matter. I'm ready to advance. Kevin, do you have any other points on that before we move forward?
No.
And let's skip the let's skip that slide, Vasily, and we'll skip the discussion of the ratio. You'd have to go back and watch that. That really was to allow you to compare last year to this year. And as we move forward, so what will happen with taxes? There you go. Thank you, Vasily. If you stop there. When we met last time, we said that one of the things that's very difficult and frustrating for taxpayers in Pennsylvania, especially when we have a Tyler reval, is you don't know what your new millage rate's going to be. We have a statute in Pennsylvania that's called the anti-windfall statute, where across the taxing district itself, what's called a municipality, is not allowed to take in more than 10% of the revenue that it took in the year before. And then they have to equalize and bring down their tax rate based on their new total assessment within the taxing district. And then they set their tax rates. We're not going to know what those are until late in 2023, November, December time period. And so one of the critiques that Kevin and I made back in April was that this particular reval company never provides an estimate of what the taxes are. And so it's almost impossible to do a cost benefit analysis. Well, They are doing that this year. First time I've seen it, and I saw this come up over the weekend. They actually have published, and you can see the hyperlinks there, that their estimate of what your millage rate will be, or your tax rate for each, the county, the school, and the municipality. So you can look that up and total it up. Now you can do a cost benefit. So this is a huge development, very favorable to taxpayers, frankly, favorable to all, because there's no reason to appeal if you think that your taxes are fair. Kevin, what do you want to add on this point?
Well, only that, that YouTube video was out for a couple of months. Maybe somebody saw what you had to say and decided maybe we ought to do that this time, or maybe not.
Hopefully.
But regardless, really, the point to make is there's something that's, nobody really cares what the county thinks your place is worth in and of itself. You only care what they think it's worth relative to what in the world your taxes are going to be. So at least this, even though it's an estimate, it's not definitive. If it can give you somebody who's looking and seeing their new value and then plugging in these potential new millage rates, and it does work. You go to the Beaver County assessment site and you can go and check it out. That's really the initial analysis before you get into what can be a long and winding road if you do file an appeal. You might even find out that your taxes are lower. But like Sharon said, pretty much in most revals in Pennsylvania, a third go up, third stay roughly the same, and a third go down. But at least this is a little bit better tool. So that's that.
But I don't know if you had a remark that was appropriate to add here. I did see that you said you had something to add about the kiosks.
Oh, well,
No, I think you asked me.
Yes, I
Yeah,
saw you.
well, I just was down there before the seminar. There's 6 kiosks.
Okay.
I saw there, but and maybe at the end, I did put together, the accountant and me, a little spreadsheet, which maybe could show how to quickly calculate that, whether or not your taxes are increasing or decreasing based upon the proposed millages versus the actual from the prior year. So I'll wait till the end. If we have time, I could share my screen, but I don't want to do that now with
Yeah, that's an awesome live example. So let's make sure we do that.
Okay.
So I think we can advance the screen. And we talked about informal, so let's skip that now. Dates to know. So this has changed since our last presentation, and these are critical dates. We know that the notices were mailed June 23rd, paper notices went out, but happily, for the first time, I've also seen in a Tyler reval, they also made them available online. So if for some reason you did not get your notice, you can just navigate to the county website, find the page, type in your owner name or your personal number, and you can see what your new assessment is going to be. Your deadline to file what everyone calls formal appeals, but really it's an appeal to the Board of Assessment Appeals of Beaver County. That is August 1st, 2023. That is the deadline that they have printed on the form. That's what they have on the website. The statute says 40 days from the date of the mailing date of the notice. I suggest you have it in by August 1. And if you want to see the appeal form itself, it is available online. That is also a wonderful development in Beaver County. Historically, they have wanted us to drive to the county to pick up a form in person, which is a 3-part carbon. Like for any of you that remember these from the 1970s, I do. My children know what they were. But now the form is available online. And Kevin, let's talk about that a minute, because you had a chance to take a look at that appeal form. Any thoughts on that?
well, the form that was handed to me, and it's what's online. One thing, to me anyway, is kind of confusing. It actually says down there toward the bottom, list 3 properties from a uniformity standpoint that you think suggest that your value should be lower, and has 3 lines. And then even below that, to further evidence that they're saying it's about uniformity, it says, if you're arguing something other than uniformity, state it here in like 2 lines. Now, that was a surprise to me, And I know you have had personal professional experience with doing what's known as a uniformity challenge. And my understanding, the way the law works and how it works, is if you're going to challenge your value, you're going to argue that you think the value that was placed there by Tyler Technologies is too high. It should be this, and it only has to do with your place. So unless something's changed with regard to what evidence is needed in showing how there's a lack of uniformity, I'm kind of confused about how that form works or how they're going to run these hearings, because that's not the way I understand a uniformity argument supposed to be.
Yeah, it's also to reinforce and support exactly what Kevin said. That's also my lived experience in Pennsylvania in 25 years of doing just this one thing. Now, when you talk to lay people, their first instinct, and I believe it is correct, is my house is higher than my neighbors and I just want to pay my fair share. And I personally feel that and believe that people should be able to bring arguments along those lines. And we have raised some of those issues at our law firm, even to the appellate courts. And I know Kevin has traveled this road as well. However, we are met with fierce resistance on this. We have been told in no uncertain terms repeatedly that we are not allowed to do that. So I too was curious, heartened, yes, suspicious, skeptical, for sure. That this invitation on the form to provide comparable assessments as opposed to comparable sales. So one hopes that Beaver County is getting out ahead to do what is good and true and right. But I have to caution, tread very carefully and lightly into uniformity argument, because those are not received with warmth from boards and from your opponents. And you will have opponents on your case. The school, the county, the municipality will be fighting to, keep the assessment as high as possible. So,
And let me just add one
I
thing.
don't know.
real
Yeah,
quick.
go ahead, Gavin.
With regard to the difficulty about getting the square footage, whether you are, and it's an okay thing to argue, you're out of whack compared to your neighbors from an assessment standpoint, uniformity, or it is, hey, my place should be valued at 250, not 300. Here are 3 recent sales that say that. Either way, this inability to be able to easily access, to be able to then make a understandable unit of comparison of dollar per square foot, either way, if they don't make this publicly available online to everybody, and instead, I don't care if you got 4, 6, or 10 terminals down there, it just, it shouldn't be that way. That's my little anecdotal, political, whatever you want to call it.
So the appeal form's available online, printed, take a look at it.
Yeah.
Let's advance the slide. And before, Kevin and I both have the same philosophy. Before you actually start filling out this form and go file it, you need to be thinking about whether you should. That's actually where we always start, whether you should. So one thing abundantly clear in Pennsylvania, and this is very different than most states, and it is a trap for the unwary. If you file an appeal, even if you are the taxpayer, your assessment can stay the same, it can go down, or it can go up. It can go up. So in that tentative example that Kevin gave, it was possible that they'd say, oh, no, actually, we missed something else. And thank you for sharing that. And the assessment goes up, and at your assessment before the Board of Assessment. So one cautions not to just walk into an appeal without evaluating whether or not the value that they put on there is actually what somebody would pay for the property. Kevin, do you want to add on that thought as well?
Well, the way that I put this to people when they're thinking about filing what I call an offensive appeal, and that is a property owner initiated appeal, is you really have to look at this. And I'm not trying to be dissuasive. I'm just being cautionary, because it's just how goofy things are here in the bizarro world of assessment law, that being Pennsylvania. you're basically saying, I want to be audited.
Yes.
And it's not only about the value of your place, but of exactly what is located at your address. I have had many people over the years who want to file an appeal. And then we dig into things like, well, what size is your house? I've had clients where their house is twice the size of what the county thinks it is. Well, that's a dead stop right there. Do not file an appeal. Okay. Because you don't have to run down there and then possibly open up a can of worms. So it just really is a cautionary tale. And unfortunately, because of, Pennsylvania being of all the states where real property value can be used as a means to extract tax money from people, and there is in both the US and Pennsylvania Constitution, uniformity. The best way to have uniformity is to have regular countywide real property reassessment. So when I have clients who move here from Texas, for example, they have a reassessment every year. They're used to it. You think adjust it this way, or a little bit that way. It's a thing. This here in Pennsylvania, you got basically within very, very, very loose constraints under state law, 67 different little fiefdoms basically that kind of run their own thing. And Sharon's about to address something here in that second bullet point. Under the statute that governs under Pennsylvania law, the one who initiated the appeal has a unilateral ability at the very beginning, up to the beginning of the hearing, to say, never mind, I don't want this audit to go on. Yet, as Sharon has here parenthetically, Beaver County's local rule, and she can expand on this, says, yeah, maybe not so much. So I guess the main point here is think real hard before you run down and open up a can of worms necessarily.
Yeah, Beaver County's local rules for the Board of Assessment. So just for this level that we're talking about here, we're just refreshed for the reval. I offered to sit on that committee and I was not selected. But since I work in all 67 counties and that's all I do, I have a pretty good sense of what the local rules are across the state and what works and what doesn't. And there's a new rule that Beaver put in, which I've never seen before in another county. And it's because it conflicts with that ability to withdraw up until the minute of the hearing. They have a section that anybody with a pecuniary interest, so for us, the taxpayer, right, everybody here, but also the school, the muni, and the county, if they aren't the person who filed, that they have an ability to petition the board to participate, which is not a thing. I'm sorry. Like, you're automatically a party. If they appeal your house, you're automatically a party. If they appeal, if you appeal, the other districts are automatically a party. There is no need to have an intervention. And then it says if the board adjudicates the person's petition to intervene and finds that they are granting intervention, functionally it acts as a cross appeal and nobody can withdraw. That is not correct. So there is a problem right there in the local rule. We'll cross that bridge when we find that in our own appeals. And also to the point about Kevin's point about the reason we see this in Pennsylvania and why we have such, bad, difficult law for taxpayers is the failure to have countywide reassessment. We are the only state in the country that does not have periodic mandatory countywide reassessment. It was us and the state of Delaware. And the state of Delaware declared their base year system, the same system we have, their Supreme Court declared to be unconstitutional in May 2020. So now we stand alone with the worst practices. We typically get a grade of D or F from the Council on State Taxation, state of Pennsylvania. Also, when Kevin said it's like an audit on your property, let's put the commercial property owners who might be out there and put that on. At the first level, at the Board of Assessment, before you go in, they're not going to be allowed to ask you questions about your income and expense and things like that. But the moment that the hearing starts, and certainly at the trial court level, you will be audited. So you will need to share your confidential lease, your income and expense, your estimates for capital improvements, your CapEx plan, your operating expenses, even if you own it, your landscaping, utilities. They're going to expect you to have this information. And even if you bring in an expert witness, they're going to have an ability to ask for more information. So for commercial owners, it's, more financial information, but it will become exposed to the process. So you should think about that carefully as well. And then we always like to point out, because a lot of people are surprised by this, you have an annual right to file in Pennsylvania. So if you feel like this is overwhelming or you're not sure the cost benefit makes sense this year, you can appeal next August as well. You have a statutory right to file your assessment appeal every year to the Board of Assessment. Further comments on that, Kevin? Are ready to?
No.
Okay, let's move forward. So, I just like to reinforce it must be in the county hands on the date, the assessment appeal. Now, I'm not sure if they're allowing it via email or electronically. Even if they do, it's not filed until the county says it's filed. Okay, so a lot of counties in Pennsylvania are moving to electronic filing. When you submit, even if you get a submit receipt, you are not filed. You are not filed until, if you file electronically, until the county, some clerk on the other side confirms and says filed. So that is also a trap for the unwary for that reason. And you certainly can file in person, or you can, mail it in or FedEx it in. And the instructions are on here, but it has to be in hand, received by the county and accepted by them by the deadline. For that reason, file early. We file everything early. Don't wait till the last day and there's a line out the door or something like that. And there's not that many days left. So that's my public service announcement on file early.
And I will tell you, like, a great deal of my assessment practices in Allegheny County, and I may be a bit of a dinosaur in doing this, but at both the initial level and anything that's filed to common pleas court is done 100% in person, because I want that stamp on there, and that's just the way that I am. And I would do it the same way in Beaver County. And even if anybody decides they're going to do it on their own, I'd seriously think about making sure that you do it in person.
Yeah, I would recommend that as well. We are, because we practice in all 67 counties and we live on this side of the state, are pretty sophisticated about, how to file in the different counties and what counties work. On the other hand, that's one reason why we file early, because we've seen all the different ways that county can follow up our filing. Even if it's just like, oh, we had a big stack, we didn't get to yours that day. So it's actually much more concerning. And there are counties that require electronic filing, so there's places we don't have a choice. In Allegheny County, which is our home county, this year, we're not having a reval, but we had a lot unexpectedly high number, if anyone's following, that we had fraud down here in Allegheny County. We had a high number of appeals. And when we started to submit our appeals early, 15 days before deadline electronically, they were so messed up that we moved back over to a manual filing system. And I, like Kevin, walked in and had them watch them hand stamp mine received. So that is a very important cautionary note. Most important thing is you want to make sure you get filed. Yep. Okay, can we advance? So this is my advice. The absolute minimum, you cannot get this wrong. You must get the correct tax parcel number. You cannot transpose a number. You can't forget a number. Just check that 10 times. Correct parcel number. You want to list where you want your notice to be mailed. So if you have an attorney, your attorney should be filling that out and have the mailing of all the decisions to come to the attorney. If you have multiple properties and you don't want it going to a vacant lot or a commercial property or something like that, you have the ability to say where you want the notice to be mailed. Make sure you're very clear about that, and it's an address that you're going to be monitoring. I always recommend that you sign in blue ink and that you submit an original signature if possible. Trap for the unwary. The Beaver County local rule states if the form is not complete, the appeal can be dismissed. That is what their local rule says. I personally disagree with that. Proceed at your own peril. If you're working with me, we would go through the form. There are actually questions on this form that I would not answer for my client base. And I would advise them and, hold my law license out on whether they should answer those questions or not. But if you are proceeding without counsel, you're going to have to make a decision about what you want to do, because their rules say that if the form is not complete, the appeal, it actually says shall be dismissed. Thoughts on that, Kevin?
No. Yes, but I'm not going to say anything right now.
Yeah. Because we're not giving legal advice here, so we have to be careful. As I say, some things we got to tread carefully.
Yeah, in fact, let me make that disclaimer right now. This is all general stuff that we're talking about. Don't anybody just run off half-cocked and say Sharon said this or Kevin said that. This is meant to sort of generally educate everybody, but don't consider anything like this specific legal advice for anyone's particular situation. You know, we have our contact information if you want to reach out to either one of us, but don't like take anything from this and just run off and say they said to do it.
Right. 100%. Okay, can we have the next slide? Okay, if you do decide to file, okay, you're going to be working on your form. What else should you be doing? If you are engaging an attorney, do it now. Because what's happening is they're going to start scheduling these hearings. And they're going to schedule them from August 1st to October 31st. And they're going to start, usually what we see is they start, whoever files first gets scheduled first. So if you're engaging an attorney, do it now, because you know the people that know how to do this are obviously only have so much time. You can represent yourself. So if you want to go in and do it yourself, perfectly within your rights. You cannot in Pennsylvania hire a non-attorney. I don't know if these folks are up lurking in Beaver County, but there are folks that call themselves tax consultants, and they are not allowed to represent you. That is the unauthorized practice of law. We have appellate cases directly on point in Pennsylvania. Happily, the Beaver County local rules suggest that you have to have an attorney or represent yourself. And in jurisdictions that have ignored this rule, understand if you're a property owner that hires a tax consultant, you do not get the protections or not just the training that an attorney has. This is a litigation process, but you also don't get the protections because as professionals in law license, we have ethics rules and we all have malpractice insurance that we're allowed to carry. So if you have, and I've seen this happen, hire a tax consultant who walks in and gets you an increase in a case that you filed for a decrease because your sale price is higher, you do not have any recourse against the tax consultant. Kevin.
Yeah, well, let me just use this as a wonderful example about how, even though there are broad parameters in the state and even cases on point about how assessments are to be handled, no other place than Allegheny County, flat out, in the first level, the Board of Property Assessment Appeals and Review will and does on a regular basis allow non-lawyers to represent property owners. So when I say that each of these 67 counties can kind of end up doing sort of their own thing, that's a perfect example.
Yep, they should not be doing that. That is illegal.
But they're allowed, and it goes on regularly.
They
So,
look the other way and they allow it. So here, whether you or your attorney are gathering your evidence, that's the other thing you're doing right now, because you're going to get ready for how I'm going to support my case when I go into the Board of Assessment. For Kevin, for residential properties, what kind of evidence do you think the boards are looking for?
well, like I said, I'm kind of confused now, seeing that question about 3 places that are you think aren't uniform or show that your place is out of whack. And basically they're saying compare it to other assessments. So honestly, I'm not sure. The way I generally understand is, and probably the best thing to do, and even going through the local rules that are also published on the county website, the only non-professional real estate valuation person, I'm an appraiser too, who can discuss value other than an appraiser is the property owner. But yet they
Correct.
do say the lawyer can, but yet it goes into great detail in those local rules that an appraisal has to be an appraisal done under the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, USPAP. And any appraiser that you might hire to do an appraisal for when you go in and say, hey, my thing is overvalued for 2024, assuming that, that is a grounds to file an appeal, even though that form suggests otherwise. A USPAP compliant appraisal, is many pages long, and it can tend to be kind of, relatively speaking, it's not inexpensive, because the appraiser, as I know this very well as an appraiser, you have to make sure that you follow USPAP, and you have to be ready that that appraisal might get used, not just at the first level, but as evidence in common pleas court, if, let's say, you do get a reduction and the school district or municipality decides to file an appeal to the Court of Common Pleas of Beaver County.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. For commercial properties, a current appraisal done for the assessment appeal is the gold standard, probably going to be required. There's going to be very few cases that we're going to take forth without an appraisal that was done just for the assessment appeal. Anyone that's working with me, we are involved in that process. We're already underway across the state, because unfortunately 66 counties also have an August 1 deadline in Pennsylvania. So my team's already underway in all the counties, lining up appraisers. If you're working in commercial, it's particularly important that the attorney that you're working with have an expertise in this, because it's also an expertise in knowing which appraiser has competency in which property type. So different appraisers, some are good at retail, some are good at self-storage, some are good at multifamily, some are good at industrial, and it matters from a credibility standpoint if you're working with somebody who's competent in that subspecialty property type for appraisal. So folks that are working with me, we lead that process. We recommend the appraiser, we talk to them through the process. So that's all undergoing right now. Because as soon as your appeal gets scheduled, they're going to have deadlines for you to submit your notice. So or your evidence. Kevin, let's advance this. We've got about 15 minutes left. Once you've filed, follow the local rules. That's where you can find them. Be aware that the 3 taxing districts can file increased cases against your property, or under the local rules, they're calling it intervention. But even if you think your value is fair, be forewarned that it is possible the taxing districts can file. Often in a reval year, we don't see a lot of taxing district appeals in my practice, in a commercial practice. However, in Delaware County in 2021, which was the Tyler reval, Tyler put the values in very low. They were at about 90% of what true market value was. And the school districts filed 20,000 increase appeals on my client base. So functionally, it was a stratified reval, give low values to all the homeowners and give artificially low values to the commercial owners, knowing that the schools will go after the commercial property owners. So that was in Delaware County. So that's just good to know. You'll get a notice if they file. Next slide. So they'll commence hearings. They say 40 days following the mailing. So they're going to start hearings. Kevin, you just got intel on this, right? They're scheduling them already.
Yeah, you walk in, and according to the one clerk, you turn that in. They're not scheduling for that day like it's going to be later that day, but they're scheduling them for into August. And these are all going to be at, I don't know the exact address, but it's in Rochester, I think, near where the old Kmart used to be.
Yeah, and that's pretty common that they'll set it up, outside the courthouse setting. And so we know they're going to start hearings August 1. When we wrote these slides, Kevin and I hadn't gotten that intel yet, that we're hearing that they're already scheduling first week in August. So we put that August 1 because that was what we've seen in other counties. We know October 31 is their deadline to finish hearings. They must certify the tax rolls by November 15th, so that gives them a couple of days. And then you'll get 20 days notice of your hearing date, but keep in mind, some of those days are burning off in the US mail. So by the time it reaches your destination and you get actual notice of it, you might have 14 days left, and you might have a deadline on you for when your evidence is due. So oftentimes in my practice, we end up functionally with about 4 days to turn around and get our evidence submitted once we know what our date is, which is why we're working on our evidence even as we're filing. Next slide. At the hearing, the taxpayer, I guess, appellant must have an opinion of value. So you cannot just go in and say, I don't know what it's worth, but here's all the things wrong with my house. Here's pictures of this or that, or things like that. So they're going to be expecting you to have an opinion of value. They will tell you they're not bound by the rules of evidence, which is meaningful to the attorneys in the audience. Their local rules are saying that appraisals have to be submitted 5 days before the hearing and served on all the other parties. And then these are the kinds of things that tangible evidence they're looking for: photographs, documents. When I say comparables, I meant sales comparables, other tangible evidence for my client base: capital expense, plans, site plans, things like that, topo maps, and then factual oral testimony. Now, factual testimony, I'll let Kevin talk about residential. I very rarely am going to bring a client rep to a Board of Assessment hearing because I don't want them to get free cross-examination and discovery on my client. A lot of the clients are from out of state anyway, but there's no value to that. I am going to have live expert testimony from the expert appraiser. So we would be there and the appraiser would be there. And that testimony, under oath is also evidence. Kevin.
Well, I'm the same way. No offense to anybody, but if you as the property owner are not there, if I'm there or some of the lawyers there, then you can't basically stick your foot in your mouth. So there's a reason why for decades attorneys have been called people's mouthpieces, and so yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
So we've got 8 minutes left, and I want to do some dates here. So Vasily, next slide. So they must act by October 31st. They have to make their decisions. You will get a notice of disposition. Next slide. You have 30 days from that date to file the appeal to court. Now we are at the Court of Common Pleas of Beaver County. This is litigation. Next slide, please. This is litigation. You will be in front of a judge. Sometimes they delegate to a special master or a mediator. You will be opposite 3 or 4 trained attorneys if you are on the taxpayer side. So this is not a warm and fuzzy environment once you get to court. This is just like any other kind of litigation. And the rules up there are entirely different than the rules that we just went over or even referenced here. And the PA rules of evidence don't technically apply, but as a practical matter, most courts do actually use them, hearsay and all those lawyerly things. Kevin, anything about this?
Well, basically, I explained to people that if it goes to the next level here being the Court of Common Pleas, it really is the same level of court as a medical malpractice case. Now, obviously, it doesn't involve as much money. It's not going to be as complex, but a whole lot of the bells and whistles, and they try to get these things settled, right? But if it doesn't get settled and it goes to a full-blown hearing,
it's a trial.
It's a trial. It's like the stuff you see on TV,
Yep.
Perry Mason and the whole bit.
There's a court reporter, et cetera. We were just in trial last week.
Yeah.
Okay, and forward. Okay, so what do you want to do, Todd? You want to come back in and show us your?
Yeah, I'll do that quickly. I think it's important, a couple pieces of information here. And can you guys stay a little bit longer if we need be for questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure if people have questions, if they want to stay on, we can give a little more time here. So thank you for the information. I am going to share, so I just need you to stop sharing. Thank you. And then I'm going to share a spreadsheet that I have here. Hope I can do that. Just confirm that you guys can see this. I can make it bigger possibly if I have to. Whoops, helps if I push the share button.
Yes, we could see your spreadsheet.
Is it big enough? Okay. So this is a real life parcel. This is an example. I don't have the parcel number and so forth. This is just vacant land in Brighton Township. And just to give you an example, how much this particular parcel has increased based upon the proposed millages from what it was. So the tax on this parcel for 14 acres in Brighton Township, I know there are people who live there, was $1,138.51. It's under the proposed new millages and value is going to go up to $5,112, a 349% increase. So, I think this is just helpful. Now, the question is the assessed value of $287,000 reasonable? First of all, I think you start, but you can start to get some sensitivity, because I think I have some folks saying, well, I've had many calls like, is my house, what did your appraisal come in? Could you sell it for that? And they kind of have a Cheshire's cat expression, like, sure, I could. I think I could do a lot better. I'm just going to stay pat. I think that's fine, as long as you're assuming everybody else is properly assessed. But there's a vast majority of under assessment, the way the math could work, maybe you might have a surprise. I don't know, but this is one thing I thought was helpful for at least me to start doing some analysis for some parcels. Any comments, Kevin, Sharon is using this as a tool?
Well, I'll say this, and then I'll let Sharon correct me if I'm wrong. What your old assessment was and the taxes associated with that versus what the new assessment is, and you go in and say, my taxes are going up 350%, means zero. What your change in taxes is relative to your particular property, it can't be the go, oh, well, okay, never mind. You're right. We're going to knock your value down to make sure your taxes are the same. That's not a valid argument. All right, Sharon?
Yeah, and I think what the benefit of the example is, it's a filter by whether we care, right? Whether we want to go in and challenge it.
Exactly.
Right, Todd? So you're like, what can I sell it for? But also, like, do I care? Because this example worked out this way. You might have an example where it's flipped, where you're paying $3,000 and now it's going to be $1,500 with that reduced millage rate. And that's why it's so powerful. This is a really great spreadsheet, and so powerful that the county has allowed us to see the millage rate estimates, because now we can do that math.
Right.
And
So-
the other thing you want to look at is, for a commercial property on a cost benefit, the appraisal is going to cost several $1,000s. So, that goes into it too. Is there enough meat on the bones to make it worthwhile to pursue the case?
Right.
Todd, I cut you off.
So I want to have the other questions addressed, but obviously they're asking for comps. So if you just simply follow their form, you'd find some like-minded comps of raw acreage or acreage in the vicinity there. And one of the reasons why I did this one on a per acre is that's a helpful way to get an idea of how the per acre is working now, just if this is as a sanity check. But if the other comps are all coming in based upon, I understand it's comps, that's what their form says, and somebody has asked that question about comparable properties.
Here's what they're saying. The way it comes across in that form, and that's what's confusing to me, is you're supposed to pick 3 places that are assessed lower than you.
Right.
So therefore, you should be lower. Okay. That, from my understanding, that is a uniformity argument. And in general, that's like not enough. What I always understood any of this to be is your place, or is that worth $20,304 an acre? Then you look and see, are the 3 other places that sold recently that show it really should be $5,000 an acre, and say, no, it should be more like $5,000 an acre based on comparable sales data, not comparable assessments that went through this mass appraisal. So that's kind of what's throwing me off about the lingo that they're using in that form.
And you have exposure. If, for example, to use this example, if you actually think the property would sell for $350, I talked to somebody I went through 15 minutes and then went through all this with him literally last week. And we get 15 minutes in, and by the way, he's an attorney, so he would think he would know better. And he goes, I said, well, the question is, it's going to cost you this or whatever. And he said, well, and I guess then there's also the fact we have it listed for double that. That's something I would like to know 15 minutes ago. If you think the property is worth 350, you have exposure to an increase if you file the appeal.
That's right.
So
And-
even if it's overassessed compared to everybody else on a uniformity argument, you definitely have exposure to an
Sure.
increase. So you have to be careful about that.
Okay, let's get to the questions. There's
Sure.
some questions there. Folks, if you want to write in questions, that'd be great. The first question is, a gentleman's asking, he has a ranch home and has a finished basement. Well, that's livable space. Is that considered to be livable space for assessment purposes, a finished versus, I guess, unfinished basement? You guys see these Q&A questions, I think.
I can't speak to how Beaver County is handling whatever. I do know that from standard appraisal practice, that is not considered part of the livable area, period. Anything that is below grade. I don't care if you have 18 gold leaf faucets and whatever. It's better than an unfinished basement, but it's definitely not to be part of the overall square footage. No.
Okay. That's a good answer, I think, because a lot of people do finish their basements. The second question is, yeah, did you say it would be advantageous to have an appraisal for my property for the hearing? And I'm assuming this may be a residential house.
My answer is still going to be yes. The qualifier to that is I'm still befuddled about those 3 comparable ways they've got it put in that questionnaire. I don't know who came up with that. But and there's even, I sent you the
Case law.
case law and all that stuff about that, Todd. I certainly don't want to think that somebody did that, have sucked people in, and then, okay, now you've because you can't withdraw the appeal, and now the taxing bodies now have you under the microscope. We're going to dig into you even more. But and
Yeah,
again,
it's probably worth mentioning too. The reason that's so important that you have that right to withdraw up until the minute the appeal starts. Once the appeal hearing starts at the Board of Assessment, you lose your unilateral right to withdraw, which means that if you don't like the result, you can file an appeal to court. Fine. If the taxing bodies don't like the result, so if you get a decrease, say you go in on your uniformity argument and you get a decrease, and the taxing districts don't like that decrease, they do have a right to appeal that decision to the trial court level, and they typically will. At least that's what they do in Allegheny County. And now they're going to be making whatever arguments they want to make.
including that
So you sort of
uniformity.
lose the control over your case once the hearing starts.
Yeah.
Well, quick follow-up on the appraisal. So let's say I refinanced my house 2 years ago. I have a independent bona fide appraisal for the loan. Can I use that?
First of all, that is not going to be for court purposes. There's going to be different lingo in that, aside from the fact it's 2 years ago. And that appraiser, you don't want to send any appraisal in that the appraiser is not going to be comfortable defending in court. And the lingo that's in your typical appraisal for mortgage purposes is different than a appraisal that is going to be done for ad valorem tax purposes like this. So my general answer to that question is no.
Yeah, my general answer is no. I mean, people do it. My general answer is no for the same reasons. The appraiser can't be compelled to testify either.
That's right.
And, it's their work product is used for one purpose. There's definitions that bind appraisers about who the user is and who's the intended audience of that appraisal. So you need to be really careful about that. That is something we actually filter through with our clients on a case-by-case basis if they have any.
In fact, let me go ahead.
No, I just want to keep moving. Is there something else on that
No, I
question?
was just going to say, I, as an appraiser, I go through recertification or, continuing it every 2 years. And whenever I would ever get an appraiser on the witness stand, I drill down on all this USPAP stuff. It's very, very, very intricate and whatnot. and I'll try and smack an appraiser this way and that way to invalidate anything that appraiser said. So it's really important that appraiser be USPAP compliant, and the appraiser that you use better be one who's pretty good in front of court, because at some point in time, you've got to keep in mind, it can always end up at the trial court level.
Another question, it's, I think, are you required to have the 3 comparable properties have to be filled out? I think we don't have to.
Well, the board rules state that you have to complete the form. So
Yeah,
that is the board's own rules. That's what they
Okay.
say. And they say that it shall be dismissed if you don't. I can't answer that for all, but I will tell you that I commonly, for my clients, it is common for me to put either to be provided or to leave blanks on county appeal forms. Every county has a different form, so this is the first time I'm saying this one, but I routinely ignore for spaces that I know they can't ask my clients. So that's, for me, it's a case by case. If you are going, Kevin, I can't give legal advice here, but if you're going in on yourself, I'd say you got to read the rules and make a decision whether you're going to do that or not. I don't know what to say because I don't think their rules are.
I'm
Okay.
going to say something, and I'm going to borrow an analogy relative to my son's looking at getting a new car, okay? And I've always gone under the understanding that it's best to never buy a used car or even a new car the first year they change the model. Because that first year, they tend to get a whole bunch of those kinks out. So buy it the second year when a lot of the kinks are out. So I use that as a backdrop, that I'm not suggesting people just don't file appeals or have your day in court or whatever, but it might not be such a bad general idea to let us all kind of wave through. And as Sharon mentioned earlier, you have a statutory right to file an appeal next year and just see how this all kind of filters out and how Beaver County figures out what they're doing and what they really mean by put in comparable assessments, which is effectively what that form is saying, as opposed to comparable sales, which is what I think it should say. And maybe let the kinks kind of work out this first go around, as opposed to you do it now and then you are in the vortex and you go through that first hearing, and then you become, in a way, maybe even a guinea pig, so to speak.
Okay. That's a good question. If ever asked that, then on the 3 comps. Another question, if your home needs interior repairs like a kitchen or bath, does that change your value?
The answer is sure. But I also caution people that when you file an appeal, it is not forever and always, however long, once that appeal is initiated, about your place in the condition it was the day you filed the appeal. Ultimately, if it gets then even to the next level and it rolls into another year, if you've fixed all of that stuff, then ultimately it's about that house, that last year of the assessment appeal. It's not frozen in time about your house the way it was the day you filed the appeal. So I always go through this question with people, what are you thinking of doing about your place if we file this appeal over the next 3 to 4 year period? And if you're thinking about putting an addition on, or if you're thinking about, maybe not putting an addition on, but, putting, I've had some clients put $1 million worth of stuff, or that's what they're planning on doing. And I just flat out say, then we ain't filing an appeal. Or you can, but I'm not handling it.
Is that because as a follow-up, because you often with those type of there's a building permit which is the checking point for them to know that you've done it. So if you're doing
Oh,
something,
yeah.
so if let's say you're doing something, and a lot of people do this where there's an improvement and perhaps they don't file a building permit, then those improvements would be never known. But the point is, if you're going to do some substantial improvements necessitating a building improvement, you possibly should expect that there could be a new assessment for those improvements. Is that fair to say?
Well, that would be independent of, if you have it under appeal, you're basically inviting a microscope on you. Okay. So any permitted work that you do is readily available to all the taxing bodies. And time and again, I'm in conciliation conferences in common pleas court where they just love waltzing over, whether it's the county or the municipality or the school district. Hey, I see that you did this, 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 and this. And let me just also say as a little cautionary tale, do not take the suggestion. I'm not saying, Todd, you're suggesting it that you should do it. If you need a permit, do it, get the permit. Do not get the permit, because you're asking for an even potentially bigger headache down the road whenever you try to sell your place, and then you got to fill out a seller disclosure. And there's lines on there, and I've represented clients who've ended up having people who have flat out lied through their teeth, didn't get any permitting or whatever, and you're ultimately stuck with it. So if whatever municipality you're in says you got to get a permit, get the dadgum permit. Okay.
Yeah, and I need to answer that too, coming at it a slightly different perspective on commercial properties. My cases take 2 to 3 years to resolve because everyone's fighting us. They're going to get appraisals on the other side. We're going to court. So if a client asks me, I have an apartment building and the pool needs $500,000 worth of work. My next question to them is, when are you planning on doing it? So if we can't, because it's not cash flowing and we're not going to do it in our CapEx plan, as we probably don't do it until year 10, and we're just going to put a tarp over it, that's a good part of our case, right? We're going to be saying like, they can't even make this property work. Nobody's going to pay something with this defunct pool. If they're planning to do it in 6 months or 18 months, and they're going to put $500,000 into it, we're going to look at whether or not the disconnect between what we think the property is worth, if it can absorb the increased value that's going to happen. So, or if it's an anchor that's empty or something like that. So that will all be worked into our thought process, knowing that it's going to take 2, 3, sometimes 4 years for a case to resolve. We sort of have to look into the future with our client.
And even here in Allegheny County with houses, I'm dealing with 3 and 4 years at issue because how bogged down things are. And because we're dealing with the revaluation in Beaver County, while definitely the volume of property is not the same as Allegheny County, chances are the court system is going to be bogged down from a lot of people filing appeals, whether they should have or they shouldn't have. So that filing an appeal in this cycle, and again, I'm suggesting maybe you wait until next year, you might be caught up where you might be 2, 3 years, even for a house in Beaver County. And, if you're building a pool or whatever, and year 3, that's going to end up becoming an issue where it might not have if you just left well enough alone.
Okay, last question we have submitted. This is I'll paraphrase. Did I understand the point correctly that taking the example Todd shared, that person's tax can only be increased 10% over last year, so that rather than the actual tax billing being $5,400, it would go up
No.
10%.
No, you did not understand that correctly.
I'll
Funds taxes are going up to
Come
5,000.
on,
Yeah. Okay. That 10% cap
is on the
is a cumulative number for the entire taxing district. If yours goes up 500% individually, no one likes it when I say it's okay. I'm not happy about it, but that's well within the law. That 10% increase is a cumulative number.
Okay. Well, that was a good question. I do want to share one last thing. I think we're at 1:15 and I think there's no more questions, but this might be helpful for everybody. Vasily, thanks for sending this link. If I can share my screen one more time, this is another good resource for everybody. This is the and let me know if you do see this. Make sure it's showing.
Yes.
Okay. This is actually the GIS data that was removed from the Beaver County website, but there is a private link you can go to through Michael Baker. And as an example, this just happens to be where Michael Baker is, and yours truly just happens to live right next door. Here is me. So, but this could be a useful for those people doing a little preliminary research to understand, like my house is here, and then there's certain houses beside and so forth, but you can actually
Can
Pretty
you click on those three dots and see what you can see in the bottom right of your parcel or any parcel?
right here.
If you look at, see your parcel ID, Todd, or
Yeah,
Bettina.
I'm gonna
Okay,
go.
or that one.
I'll do St. Barnabas. and see
Yeah,
what-
do the, if you
versus my
can,
ad.
there's three dots. I'm just curious what, okay, so not too much information.
Yeah, you're
I
gonna
just
have,
wondered what else was there.
you, like, for instance, this is,
Yeah, it doesn't have the, it doesn't have the like building square footage or anything like that.
let me see here. Let me just take a look here. There's a
It
big,
usually doesn't.
there's a big building right here.
It does have the acreage. But I think that's on the blotter that we can see now too.
Right, so here's your, maybe you click right here, assessment property search.
Yeah, that probably takes you to the blotter.
Yep. So there are, the links are still there. I mean, they're.
Well, I'll tell you right now, those links are what used to be, and you can see those things though you see as I'm
Right.
pointing, those hyperlinks are gone. But when you go down and you look at the individual things of one of those 6 kiosks, I mean, the depth of what they have there and color code and all that stuff, it's really cool.
Yeah,
It's just a shame that you got to go down there to be able to look at it.
yeah, so, but I just want to let folks know that this really is pretty, this is the, if you Google this, you should be able to find this information, at least to give you an idea of potential. I know they're comps, but they're asking for that as well.
It's I
It's,
don't
and it's just a matter of seeing how, like, this parcel would be, assessed, but looks like they have the new assessment information here. So, for example, apparently this property, this half acre is assessed at $27,000. If I'm reading that correctly.
yeah.
Todd, click the assessment property search. I want to say that those are different values than shows up.
Yeah, that's got to be the old one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that if it was 27,000, it would be awful.
But
low.
it says assessment for year 2024 there in the middle.
That's the new assessment.
That's the new one.
Oh, that's the new one. I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
But my only point is, now this one actually has 23 acres. Wait a minute. Not that we're trying to do, but 23 acres at, is that right? For 148,000?
That's what they say.
Okay, no comment. Okay.
I understand.
So, but for the folks out there, we're down to, I think, the people hanger honors, we still got maybe 34 people there, but this is kind of, this real data to look at. So I'm a little confused on that one. Why this parcel's not here, but we're not going to do research in St. Barnabas. I just picked it because that's where the old old Michael Baker was here. Okay, it's 1:18. I don't think there's any more questions. Thanks so much, Kevin, Sharon, for your time. I know the fellow Beaver County's appreciate this, and of course, the takeaway too is if anybody has questions, your contact info, we can ask for the PowerPoint, we can provide to you, and go from there, because I know our clients tend to ask me what I think, and then secondly, can I help them? And I really can't, based upon what you can describe there.
Anybody here, anybody they share this with, you want to reach out to me about a house and it's residential, please, feel free. All my contact information is at the beginning. And commercial, reach out to Sharon, or industrial.
Phil, and you
Thank
guys,
you for having us.
Phil, you might be busy. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.